sir.
Thank you. This is a presentation on stop motion animation. This is something that I had experience with in college, and at the time, a brother of mine that was in high school, he did a bunch of movies using stop motion animation. This is something that other libraries are doing. If anybody's interested, I found some professional articles. I wasn't able to print them out for everybody, but if you're interested in knowing more, there are some articles regarding stop motion animation. I can get the citations for that. So this is an idea that can be of interest to teens or even older kids. How many of you guys have seen movies like Wallace and Gromit or Coraline, or there's one with Box Trolls, and those are all claymation animation. So what they're doing is they have clay figures and they're moving them one step at a time, and then they're putting everything together into a finished movie. What my brother and I did was we used Legos. So I'm going to do a couple of demonstrations with actual Legos. I have the camera here. Another option is to do it with people. So you set your camera and then you have your person standing like this, and then you take successive frames with a person and you can get a picture. I've seen advertisements on television where they maybe have the people lying on the floor and things are happening, draw pictures in the chalk pictures are moving, that types of thing. So there are a lot of different kits out there. I wasn't able to get the kit that my brother and I used, but I was able to get this one. It's called Stop Motion Explosion. It's $50. There's some pros and cons to it. One of the good things about it is the webcam. As you can see, I've got the webcam here. I'm going to pull this up. So the camera right now is looking at my scene, this base plate. I have a car here that I'm going to be using. And what you want is you want a webcam that stays in one place. Because if your camera is moving at all, then the quality of your animation is going to suffer because it's going to look really jolted. This has a rubber base to it. You could actually, and I tried this, you can actually take Legos and you can kind of create a form to hold your camera if you want your camera to stick onto your Lego base plate. But that's one of the key things, is you don't want your camera to move. So if you're trying to do it with a webcam that's inside of a laptop and you bump your laptop, well, all of a sudden your frame of reference would be gone. So I've seen other kits out there that have extendable arms, so you move the extendable arm. Don't know how well those work, but there are actually a lot of really cheap products out there. This one's $50. The downside to this was it's advertised that it has a book. The book has a lot of good information. It's got a quick start guide. Here they're showing what's called a Modibot, which is kind of like the Sticky Bot, except this looks like it would be a little bit easier to move. You want the figure's joints to be rigid enough so that they stay in place. But the downside of this was it says it comes with sound effects, and it does, but the software doesn't actually allow you to put the sound effects in. So this software, like I'll be showing you in just a little bit, it will allow you to create a movie from your frames and put it together. But then you would have to go out and find some sound editing software, and there are a bunch of things out there. It's just not included. But if you wanted to put sound effects in, so that was a disappointment. It doesn't come with any music, but that's that kit. Like I said, that was $50. But also want to talk about, before I get started here, just some of the skills that this would teach kids. So, for example, writing a screenplay. If you're going to put together a movie, you're going to want to have a screenplay. Another thing for the graphic artist inclined would be a storyboard. And that's what, so a screenplay and a storyboard, those are things that directors of major movies use. They have a screenplay so everybody knows what's going to be said, and then a storyboard is basically a comic strip showing the different scenes in the movie, but it might have arrows to indicate motion. So my brother and I, when we created our movies, we did write screenplays. We didn't do storyboards, but those are some things that kids could work on. They could work on a screenplay, they could work on a storyboard. Also sound effects, if they were creating their own sound effects, they could be, you know, I don't know, say you want the sound of running water, well, how would you record that? And, you know, a water bottle and slosh it around in front of a microphone. But those are some other things that would be involved. And of course, if they're into music composition, you could bring in music composition software so they can write their own soundtracks. Those are all some things that go along with this. So it's actually a really time-consuming process. But I'm going to get right started here because I have this set up. So what I want to do first is show you the stop-motion explosion software. And I'm going to animate this car driving across the platform. So one thing to look at right here, we have, I can't see my mouse. Here we have frames per second. So I'm going to set this to 12 frames per second. That's what my brother and I used. But just keep in mind that frame rate, frames per second, that means how many pictures we're going to take for 1 second of animation. So if you set it to a really high number, it's going to take forever. So 10 or 12, you'll see how this works. Now with the software, I'm going to create a new project. And it's already grabbed the first frame. So it's grabbed one frame, and now I'm going to grab several frames. I'm going to grab 12 frames of stillness. And we just grabbed 1 second of the movie. So the movie's going to wait 1 second, and then the car is going to start to drive. So I can move the car a little bit, grab a frame, move the car a little bit, and the wheels are on the base plate, so they're kind of, so I'm moving the same increment each time. And if you weren't doing that, you'd get kind of a jerky animation. But this works pretty well. And another thing I want to make sure is that my base plate isn't moving and my camera isn't moving. Again, this is the tricky one because the one wheel is off the edge. So at 12 frames per second, we're almost up to 2 seconds. And then a couple other considerations. You have scenery, that's another thing. So there could be a backdrop to this, like what I'm doing right now. Obviously there's not a real backdrop. You can see the box in the background. But that's another thing to design, the backdrop. And it's kind of like the puppet stage. You can have some fabric or some colored cardboard. So we're almost at 3 seconds here. So this gives you kind of an idea of all the work that went into the Wallace and Gromit movies and the other movies we talked about. So we're at 3 seconds. And I'm not going to be able to get it to drive all the way because I'm going to run out of room. And again, I'm trying to keep everything in the same place so I don't move the base plate. Well, this could be interesting because we got a little piece of Mary on the side of the.
Yeah, I just realized that.
Yeah.
Bad.
You're always animated.
So, and now I put about a second of stillness at the end. So we have 53 frames, just to add a few more here. So we have 60 frames, so that, all that work goes into 5 seconds, and now I should be able to play it.
Go.
You see that?
That is cool.
Yeah, and you could see a little bit of Mary at the very end there. Okay, here we go.
Cool.
And then Mary moved a little bit.
Should
So,
have the flag.
yeah. But you
That would be a
could
good idea.
you could see how you could do this with actors. You know, as long as their motions are close enough to the last. This also gives you an option called onion skin. Let's see. So it will show you multiple frames at the same time. If you were wondering, let's say I made a mistake and I knocked my car onto the ground, then you use that onion skin button and you find out what was your last frame. And then it will give you a reference so that you can put it back. One more thing to notice here. Notice our lighting. Just pay attention to the lighting here. Pretty good. There's a little bit of a flicker in there,
Right.
and I would guess what that little bit of a flicker was me moving back to the laptop.
Changing it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up another example that I did at home.